the LaxFactor podcast. What is up, college lacrosse fans? You're watching episode number 295 of the LaxFactor podcast. I'm your host, Ted Hoost, and today we're going to go through, preview a bunch of games that are being played by members of what we would call the top 10 via Inside Lacrosse's media poll. Before I dive into it, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, please share the show with other people. We're rocking every Thursday, Sunday, and Tuesday now with shows, so full episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday with other videos in between. And as always, you can go to LaxFactor.com, get yourself a LaxFactor podcast t-shirt to support the channel, because these videos largely, if they show highlights, get flagged and I make no money off of them. And you can get other t-shirts that aren't related to LaxFactor as well. First game that I would like to talk about here, number 1, Maryland, hosting Delaware. Delaware's 3-1. I don't see how Delaware has a chance overall. They are 3-1, but their wins are over Utah, St. John's, and High Point. They only put up 2 goals against a very good Penn defense that's ranked below Maryland's by a lot. Maryland boasts the second-ranked defense, while Penn is 12th. So, I mean, a lot. It's still pretty considerable when you're the number 2 versus the number 12. Couple that with Delaware's offense. They're only coming in at number 48. This is not the Delaware offensive juggernaut that they've been, where they've had 3 filthy attackmen across the board, all 3 of them legit All-American level. And you can start to see, though, overall how this, starts to spell disaster for a Delaware team that's gotten used to kind of playing well against highly ranked teams. They've played reasonably well, let's say, against very good teams. I don't see that being the case this time. Something to watch, Braden Erksa, and this isn't me shitting on Braden Erksa. It's going to sound like an insult at first, but it's not. So far this season, Braden Erksa has more turnovers than points in 4 of Maryland's 5 games this year. If he can turn that around, and if he could just shave 1 turnover per game off of his tally and add 1 point a game, which he is completely capable of, this Maryland team, offensively, I did not expect for them to be as efficient and to play as well as they have. And they have figured it out. And if Braden Erksa can increase his production by just a little bit, because I still think he is their best player offensively. I would assume, or I assumed coming into this, he was their best dodger. So I'm not sure how much of this is, teams really making an effort to some degree to limit quality looks out of Erksa versus he's just, maybe struggling to find the flow. But if he finds the flow, this Maryland offense is going to be very tough to beat, and you're going to have a Maryland team that it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility that they could run the table on their season. I don't think Maryland's going to run the table and have an undefeated season, but right now they look like the best team in the country, and offensively they're not even, in my opinion, clicking fully yet. If they start to click fully with the way this defense is playing, all bets are off here. Look out. In this one, I'm picking Maryland by 8 to 10 goals. Now, before I dive into the next game that I want to cover, I forgot I wanted to go through and I wanted to talk about my predictions thus far. Over week 1, and granted, I'm picking against the top 20. So this isn't me finding like some obscure game that's truly a 50-50 split. I'm just saying, hey, the games I talk about, picking a winner as the season goes on, I'm sure it'll get a little bit more difficult. But when you're dealing with week 1, I was 7-1, and I also, as you know, picked the spreads. So I was 7-1 that week, and I got 2 of the spreads correct. And by spreads, I say, if I said Maryland by 8 to 10 goals, if they finished within that 8 to 10 goals, then that's me catching the spread properly. Week 2, I was 8-2. I got 1 spread correct. Week 3, I was 6-2. Got 1 spread correct, and then week 4, I was 7-1, and I got 4 spreads correct. I think that was all the weeks that I did predictions so far. I might have missed some, but so far this season, assuming I haven't missed any, I'm 28-6 in terms of picking the winner, and I have properly picked the spreads of 8 games. So that's my stats there, so far, and we'll dive into this now. But I hope I said it. I said Maryland by Maryland by 8 to 10 over Delaware. Now we are going to go into Notre Dame hosting Ohio State. Now, after losing their season opener at home to Utah, Ohio State's won 6 straight games, including the eyebrow raiser against Virginia 2 weeks ago. where they came out and just beat the crap out of Virginia. Notre Dame hasn't lost in ages, up to the point that they lost last weekend against Notre Dame, so the Irish are definitely going to be out for revenge in this one. Now, Ohio State has gotten to this point, gotten to the 6-win plateau here by playing incredible defense. They're currently ranked fourth in defensive efficiency by lacrosse reference, pro lacrosse reference. Notre Dame, however, normally heralded for their defense, is currently ranked 39th. Now, I think you'd probably argue Notre Dame's played a slightly better schedule than Ohio State, but not by much. I mean, Georgetown and Maryland are their two marquee games. Ohio State has Virginia. So, yeah, Notre Dame's got a slightly tougher, not even slightly, probably a decently tougher strength of schedule, but their defense and their goaltending has not been championship level thus far, and it's going to need to be down the stretch here. At first, I was thinking I was going to go with Notre Dame all the way, probably by a margin in this one, because they're going to be out for blood. But I really like what this Ohio State team has done defensively. As I said, they've held their opponents to 5 or fewer goals 4 times this season. We can actually see that if we pop this up here. You can see, okay, that outlier there, the Utah game, held Detroit Mercy to 4, ho-hum. Cleveland State to 4, ho-hum. Bellarmine to 4, ho-hum. And then Air Force come out and put some points up on them, but they win by a margin. That Virginia goal, though, or game, 14-5, they held, even though Virginia's down, to hold that offense to 5 goals. I don't know if that's going to happen again this year. You look at what they've done so far, 19 goals in a win, 10 goals in a loss to a very good Richmond team, 17 goals against High Point, 5 goals in that loss to Ohio State, and then they still put up 12 against Johns Hopkins. So this isn't like some kind of chump offense that Virginia put out there that Ohio State just caught in the right ear. They are playing very good defense. Also, they're taking each team's leading scorer and making sure that they stay under their average points per game. Now, Bryant in that 7-5 win that they had last week, Dawson Riley is Bryant's leading scorer. Coming into that game, he was averaging 3. Well, let's not say coming into that game for all of these. Without the Ohio State game in play, he averaged 3.75 points per game, only had 2 against Ohio State. In Virginia, we'll cover 2 guys. Now, we're not going to cover Colsey because he went off and he scored above his average. But Truett Sunderland coming into that Virginia game against Ohio State was averaging 5.5 points a game. He puts up 3. McCabe Millen in that game against Ohio State comes in averaging 4.25 points per game. He puts up 0. Against Bellarmine, John Alley, averaging 4.87 points per game, puts up 1 against Ohio State. Cleveland State, their leading scorer, 2.8 points per game. He had 0. And then I think Bellarmine, there was another one of these games, Air Force. So that was an anomaly. They had 2 guys put up 7 points in that one. So that was an anomaly, but it was still a big win. And then the Utah game was the other anomaly. So generally, these guys are playing crazy defense, and what are we going to do here? I got to make a pick. It's tough. So 4 of their 6 games, though, this defense has been outstanding, and thus far they've played their best lacrosse against the best team that they've faced so far this season in Virginia. It's presumed that right now that up to this point, Virginia is the best team they've played, and they played their best game in that one, which is not usually the case. You normally are going to have defenses are going to wax the bad teams, and they'll just play well against the good teams. In this case, they played their best game against the best offense they faced overall. In this one, I still think Notre Dame's going to win. I think the revenge aspect of this is going to be a little bit too much for Ohio State to handle overall. So I'm going to go Notre Dame by 4 to 6 goals by the end, but I think it will be a slow burn to the 4 to 6 goal victory for Notre Dame. Next game, we're going to talk about number 8 Penn State at number 3 Cornell, and I get it. They might be playing in random places or whatever, but technically Cornell's the home team, so Penn State at Cornell, even if it was being played in Bangladesh or something. Cornell barely got by Richmond last weekend. That doesn't matter. They still booked a victory. Penn State handled Yale. Yale stinks apparently, though, so a win is a win is a win. Whether you beat Richmond by a goal or whether you beat Penn State or Yale by 5, it doesn't matter. A W is a W. I think Penn State's become my sneaky contender for a Final Four spot. They have quality wins over Colgate and Navy, and then they took Princeton right down to the wire, losing in overtime. Matt Traynor, he came out the gate with 7 points a day, or 7 with a 7-point day in a revenge win over Colgate to start their season. Since that game, he's put up 1 less point in each game as the season's played out. He had 6 points in the win over Villanova, 5 points in the loss to Princeton, 4 points in the win over Navy, and then just a single point in that win over Yale. Now, my worry was it did not look like he played at all in the second half. They had a 10-4 lead at halftime. He appeared in the stat book in the second quarter, did not appear in the stat book over third and fourth. I did not watch that game, so maybe they were just resting him. Maybe he was nursing a minor injury for betting purposes. If someone could chirp the comments here and let me know, which was it? Was he hurt? Is he fine? If he's fine overall, I think this is going to be a ball game. I don't think Cornell is going to be able to just, stop Matt Traynor for putting up 4 goals and a helper, something to that effect. I assume he's going to have 5 points in this game, and if he has 5 points in this game, I think Penn State has a chance to be in it. The problem being Cornell's defense has looked as good as their offense thus far. I was going to assume Cornell was going to continue their trend of last season and be not full-on Yale level allergic to playing defense, but a little bit allergic. Like you play defense and you get a little bit of a sniffle and your eyes start watering type shit. But that hasn't been the case. Their defense is currently sitting at number 3 in the country, only giving up goals on 22.3% of their possessions, whereas Penn State has been almost as good defensively, ranked 8th with a 23.7% efficiency score. So in the end, Cornell holds a bigger edge offensively than Penn State does. They boast the leading scorer in the country in C.J. Kirst versus Traynor, who's sitting somewhere in the neighborhood of 20th in the country. Kirst is averaging right now 7.5 points per game over their first 4 outings. And if you look at who they've played, Lehigh, not a bad team. Denver, not a bad team. Hobart, ho-hum, and then Richmond. And so, it's not like they've played chumps thus far. But Matt Traynor's good in the end here, and I like Penn State's chances if he has a monster game, but C.J. Kirst is better, so I'm going with Cornell by 2 to 4 goals for this one. Princeton and Rutgers. Now, Princeton holds wins over current number 6 North Carolina, current number 8 Penn State, and current number 9 Duke, and they win the North Carolina and Duke games over the weekend. They go in, they don't have those wins, they're 2-1 or 1-1. They come out of the weekend 3-1 with 2 wins over Duke and North Carolina. So that's pretty damn good for the Tigers. Now, in the battle for Dirty Jersey, they're going to take it to Rutgers. Rutgers benefited a couple of seasons after COVID with nailing some really good transfers, but they seem to be back to their middle-of-the-pack selves at this point, I would assume. The rivalry game aspect, I think, helps Rutgers more than it helps Penn State, or more than it helps Princeton, but the Tigers' offense is deadly, and I don't see Rutgers having an answer for Coulter Mackesy. I think he's going to feast probably a 6 or 7 point game out of him, probably goal-heavy to boot. Rutgers' only hope is if their mighty goaltender, Carden Stoller, who has played very well so far, he played solid lacrosse almost every game. He's been above 57% in every game this season. They've played some good teams. In Army, he was solid. They lost by a margin, but he was still good. Stony Brook, a quality team. Lehigh, not bad. St. Joseph's, not the team they used to be. But you look at his stats. He's putting up numbers every game. So that's going to be one of their hopes here. Can Rutgers perform here against or can Stoller perform here against a very good offense in Princeton? Face-off wise, Andrew McMeekin. I had predicted last week that, hey, I think Andrew McMeekin is going to handle his problems on Friday against, who was it at that point? They played Duke, I think, on Friday, and I predicted that Princeton would win, that Andrew McMeekin was going to win at least 40% or more of his face-offs. He did that. So I think his success is going to continue. Pilato here is a very good face-off man. And this Ethan Bernard has spelled him and done well when he's gotten some mop-up duty. But I still think McMeekin's probably going to win enough. I think in cage, Craddock has been good. Not as good as Stoller, but good enough. And I think that just the offensive firepower of Princeton is going to be too much. So I think that, if I actually wrote this down. I think if Stoller has a 20-save day, this game could go Rutgers' way by a goal, maybe. If he puts up 17 saves or less, Princeton's going to win by 3 or 4. If he puts up less than 17 saves, Princeton's going to win by 3 or 4. But if he gets up there 15, 16, 17, that's just going to make it more difficult. That's a goal that Princeton would have had that Stoller robbed them of it. So in the end, I think Princeton's going to prove too much. Stoller's just going to get shelled. He's going to see a ton of shots and probably a ton of quality shots. I'm going to go Princeton by 6-8. I think Princeton's capable of beating them by 10-12. I just don't think they will. Like I said, I think that dirty Jersey rivalry mentality might help Rutgers a little bit. So I'm going 6-8 goal spread on this one, but Princeton will come out the victor. Number 5, Army against Holy Cross, who's 3-4. Eicher, Fountain, Fellows, and Plunkett are all going to put up at least 3 points each. Sean Burns going to be 66% in cage or more, depending on the number of shots he faces here. Look at him so far. He's just been incredible. If we dive into his stats so far, best goalie in the country right now, no question. 67%, 77%, 84. Dude hasn't been below 64% so far. Now, granted, they have played one of the weakest schedules out of all of the top teams. I'm a believer in their number 5 ranking at this point because it's the what have you done lately, and lately they've been winning games and they have dudes putting up big numbers, and you can't help but think, damn, that Sean Burns is that Sean Byrne is a really good goalie. I think Will Coletti is going to win 54% or more of the faceoffs he takes. Army by 8 to 10 goals. What the hell else are we going to say? It could be beyond that, but I'm going 8 to 10 just because Army doesn't tend to kick the shit out of people. Maybe that's by design. Hofstra, North Carolina, number 6 North Carolina, 4-1 coming off the Ivy League loss here over the weekend. Both of these teams are 4-1, but UNC's looks a lot better than Hofstra's. UNC has wins over Michigan, Stony Brook, Hopkins, Penn, and a 2-goal loss to Princeton. Hofstra has wins over Iona, Wagner, St. John's, and Binghamton, and Hofstra's loss is to fucking Siena, which does not look great for them. If the Heels don't play not like us during warmups, I am going to be extremely upset because one of these things is not like the other. Hofstra is not like North Carolina. Playing on the road, Carolina is going to put the hurt on them, 8 to 10 goals. Once again, I don't think Hofstra's terrible. I think they're going to put some goals up, and especially once you get to mop-up duty, that's where I think they can bring it back to 8 to 10. I wouldn't be surprised to see Carolina up by 12 or 13 at some point in this game. I just think that Carolina offense is that good, and I do not think Hofstra, and I think they're starting to click and figure it out, and I do not see Hofstra having an answer for him. So 8 to 10, I think, is a reasonable spread for that one. Just making sure I'm recording over here. Thank God here. All right, got to talk about him. Number 7, Johns Hopkins at number 11, Syracuse in the Carrier Dome here. Now, at the start of the season, the way things looked, I think most talking heads, including myself, obviously would have assumed Syracuse would go into this game at least a slight favorite by a smidge. Fast forward to today, I'm fully prepared to predict Hopkins is going to win this game. The Cuse offense has struggled to score goals in the second half of too many games, even against subpar opponents. And on the flip, Hopkins has thrived at times while down late in games and has managed to claw back and pick up victories. And victories in very close games here. If we look at, what Hopkins has done in terms of being tested. Close game, 3-goal game against Denver, 1 against Towson. Beat up on Georgetown decently, 1-goal game against Loyola, 1-goal loss to Carolina, 1-goal win. I mean, they are battle tested and they have played a very good schedule thus far. Much better schedule so far than what Syracuse has played. Russell Melendez, he's now found his stride and is now Hopkins' leading scorer with Matt Collison right behind him. That means all is well with the Jays offensively. Their big cats are producing consistently. Guys like Hunter Chauvette and Brooks English are getting freaky when they need them to. Chauvette, after not scoring, I think in 2 games straight, ended up having a good game last week, or over the weekend here. So they're getting help from people, but their big cats are finally contributing at the level I was hoping they would, at the level they needed to for Hopkins to continue to be back and be one of the best teams in the country and remain in that top 10. When it comes down to it, there is very little that I feel good about for Syracuse in this game. The way Hopkins defense matches up against the Syracuse offense, they have poles that can handle the Syracuse attack in one-on-one matchups. That's automatically going to create a situation for Syracuse where it's going to be rougher to get looks and to beat these one-on-one matchups, draw slides, and then do their whole little dip and dunk and, tic-tac-toe shit. They have short sticks also, Hopkins does, that can limit big games out of the Syracuse midfielders. As long, Luke Roa being healthy, he was back last week. That's going to help for sure for Syracuse. Luke Stout, more experience in big games, and he's been good enough for Hopkins when it matters most, whereas McCool, even though he has better numbers overall, he's been benched already once, and although he did bounce back and played good against Utah, so I hope that continues for him. John Mullen presents the only area where I think Syracuse has an outright clear advantage, but Logan Callahan is no chump either for Hopkins here. And when I say, I think the Syracuse attack is better as a unit than the Hopkins attack, but not by a ton in terms of production. And then if you look at the Hopkins defense, that's where I think that negates the strength that Syracuse's attack might pose. You know what I mean? So in the end, how down on the Syracuse team I am overall. I've started to lose a little bit of confidence in the coaching staff, even to a degree, just because how can you not, when you look at this trend of tearing people up in the first half, coming out and getting beat by mediocre teams in the second half? I don't understand that. That does not make me feel great. It's been rough to watch, which is why I have to pick Syracuse by 1 goal in overtime, motherfuckers. The LaxFactor Podcast.